Kumar. He is the Deputy Minister of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. John Kumar.
Thank you very much, George. Good morning. And Madam Chairman was my classmate in Legon. He and Professor Bobkin, we all completed in the same year. So I'm happy to be with you this morning. And also to Dr. Albert of the IMF and Prof. and everybody here gathered. The time is short, so I want to thank organizers of this program for the opportunity to be part on behalf of government to explain the need for us to accept the e-levy as a better option for us as a country in strengthening the revenue side of our budget or financing, so that there will be no need for us to either go to the IMF or any other external support. I believe that as a country, we have the capacity to come out of the financial difficulties that we find ourselves. I want to start by putting into perspective our debt level. What is the Ghana's public debt stock? And as at November 2021, when the last budget was presented, Ghana's debt was 344 billion.509. So the external component of it was 165.108 billion, and the domestic component was 179.401 billion. So when you put the two together, our total public debt as at November was 344.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now that translates to about 78.41% of GDP, and so in terms of where we stand today, this is the debt levels of our country. Now, what are the reasons that have accounted for this nominal debt increase to from the 122 billion in 2017 to the 344 billion that we are talking about? And I have heard all kinds of argument. If you look at the percentage in terms of growth of our debt, when the NDC government picked it in 2009, it was 9 billion Ghana cedis. By the time they were living in 8 years, the debt levels was 122 billion. In terms of percentage, that was 1,355% increment in our debt levels. But if you look at where this current government picked it from, 122 to the 344 billion we are talking about, is an increment of about 270%. So yes, so in terms of percentage of growth in our debt, it is not unusual if you compare the records. But what has accounted for the extra 222 billion that we have put on our debt in the past 5 years? And one of the key factors has been the cleanup, financial sector cleanup exercise that we did as a country. Government spent 21.5 billion trying to clean up the financial sector. We also have exchange rate depreciation issues. It's accounting for about 48 billion cedis of the increment of the 222 extra that we have seen. 48 billion of that is as a result of exchange rate depreciation. And then we had problems at the energy sector. You remember the Doomsaw and all the IPPs, the take or pay contracts that were signed under the NDC government that we needed to renegotiate and put it to manageable levels. Ghana spent 26, we are still spending But so far we spent 26.4 billion in trying to manage the energy sector crisis that we have in our country. And then in 2017 there was an undisbursed loans that were already inherited from the previous government. That was about 6 billion Ghana cedis. So when you put all these figures together, plus loans contracted during the COVID, we heard how much IMF supported Ghana with initially $1 billion, plus the SDR support that came, another $1 billion. Well, that one we don't have to pay back, I guess. It was an equity thing. Then the World Bank also gave us about $430 million to be able to manage the COVID, because in that particular COVID year, there was a revenue gap of 11.6 billion and unbudgeted expenditure gap of 13.8 billion. When you put together, there was a gap of about 25.5 billion that Ghana needed to find money to be able to preserve lives of people in the country. And so all kinds of support came, but most of them were loans. I think even the Bank of Ghana, as asset purchasing arrangement we did, the 10 billion cedis was also a loan that added on to our debt. So with the exception of, I think, the contingency fund of about 1.2 billion we took from our own fund, which was a grant, and then about 349 million cedis from South Korea. Every other support that we got in terms of trying to fill that gap came as a loan. And all these things have added to our public debt in arriving at the extra 222 billion that we see. Now, many concerns have been raised that Ghana is at the risk of high debt distress situation, and so something has to be done. Now we know the problem. We know our debt levels. How do we solve it? So if you check the 2022 budget, government in trying to rebound out of the COVID, the economy was able to grow about 6.6% in the third quarter, even though the annual average growth for 2021 was targeted at 4.4%. We believe that by the time the fourth quarter figures come, Ghana should do about 5%. So we are rebounding. The revenue target for GRA last year was 57 billion. They exceeded and raised 57.2 billion. So we are very confident that the steps that we are taking to come out of the COVID situation that we faced in 2020, the steps are working, and we are going to begin to see the impact. But the reality is that because we took too much loans in the COVID, which raised our deficit to about 15%, in 2021, when you do the above the line reporting and add the FinSec and IPP and all those things I've told you about, it brought the deficit down to 12.1%. And when you exclude some of them, then it comes to the 9.7 that we did. And going forward into 2022, government is saying we want to bring the deficit down to 7.4%, which means that we have to do a lot of fiscal consolidation, and we are trying to post a positive primary balance in line with our Fiscal Responsibility Act. In fact, because of COVID, Parliament suspended the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which requires every government in Ghana, in your budget year, not to spend about 5% of deficit of your GDP, and then also to post a positive primary balance. The essence of a positive primary balance is to reduce your debt accumulation so that you are bringing down the debt every year, year on year, and it becomes sustainable. You bring it to sustainable path. So this is where we are. The target is to post a positive primary balance this year in 2022, and then also to reduce the deficit above the line reporting plus the FinSec and everything and all the loans we have taken to 7.4% from the 12.1 last year. So that's a very steep fiscal slope to work on. And so one of the key policies that government is introducing so that we are able, because there are two approaches. You either have to cut down your expenditures, or you raise your revenues to a level that is able to make your budget and financing arrangement compatible. So government is introducing the Yee levy, which is one key revenue measure that is going to generate about 6.9 billion. In terms of dollars, that's about $1.2 billion every year. And many people have raised concerns about even that target. But I can assure you, from the research we did, this is a conservative revenue target in terms of the revenue generation we'll get from the Yee levy. If anybody tells you that we are not going to get that figure, tell him it's not true. We believe in what we have done. It is a very, very conservative figure. And even we know that once you introduce a tax, there will be attrition rate. People will initially resist and try to avoid it and all that. Even that has been factored to about 24% of attrition rate. We factored all those things in coming into. And sometimes I'm very careful at pointing to that, because the next time the headline will come, Puma says that Momo users have been reduced by 24%, which is not what I'm saying. I'm only saying that in our revenue projections, we did attrition rate with that figure, so that in case we want to hit a certain amount that we expect to get, and it's even dropping, we will still be within the range. So Yee levy, as far as government is concerned, would help us to raise about $1.2 billion, which is about 6.9 billion in 2022. And the focus is to help us address about three key things. First of all, it is not true that government has said Yee levy is going to solve all problems in our country. We haven't said that. And we made it clear in the budget that we will position Yee levy to address three key things. One, youth unemployment issues, job creation. And we talked about YouStart, where government is targeting to raise 10 billion cedis in the next 3 years to fund job creation, youth ideas financing in our country. Secondly, it's about infrastructure, road construction particularly, and digital infrastructure, so that we'll even be able to increase the concerns people have about development of our digital space. The Yee levy is rather going to lead to an increased development of infrastructure in our digital space. In Ghana, some of the areas don't have the telcos network, and we need extra investment to achieve that. The Yee levy is targeting that extra infrastructure expansion in the telco space. So it's going to happen. Then, most importantly, our debt, fiscal consolidation issues, trying to reduce the debt from the levels where we find ourselves to let it come down to sustainable levels. These are the three key reasons why government is pleading with Ghanaians to agree that this Yee levy intervention will be very crucial. Now, because of time, let me go straight to the argument. The argument has been, why are you burdening Ghanaians with Yee levy? Why don't you go to IMF to seek for support? Now, we have been to IMF about 15 or 17 times. So going to IMF is not a problem for our country. But what is the resource when you go to IMF? And what is the alternative to the ideas that we have? The IMF has been our trusted advisors and development partners over the years. And we are actually a member of the organization. So going to an IMF, we have not said it's a crime. But what we are saying is that what has been the experience and what is the alternative position to that IMF proposition? So the last time we were in IMF was from 2015, and we exited, I think, in 2018 or 2019. 2019. Good. So over the 3-4 year period, Ghana received an amount of $980 million. Let's even make it $1 billion. This is a loan, remember. It is not a grant. It is a loan that was disbursed to Ghana in a period of 3-4 years. It will come with disciplinary conditions, because that's the only role IMF is playing, trying to put you on a fiscal sustainable path. It comes with discipline. And it's not just Ghana. Every country that agrees to go through that path, you are only saying that you have mismanaged your economy, or you are sick on an emergency bed and you have to recover. So they come in with disciplinary measures to control your expenditures so that, and conditionalities that help you to come down within sustainable fiscal measures. There's nothing wrong with discipline. But there is social and political and economic consequences for going through an IMF program. And you and I know that before the NDC government left, we had formed Graduate Unemployment Association in our country. About 100,000, we had to introduce what we call NAPCO to absorb about 100,000 graduates who had completed school for 3-4 years with no opportunity in the public sector. A lot of consequences will come when you want to go through a certain path. Now, government says that instead of going through IMF, which this year we may even be lucky to get more than 1 billion, we may even get 2 billion or even 3 billion. Government says that, why don't we talk to our people, the citizens, ask them to agree to 1.75, now reduced to 1.5%, which is the yield levy. It is going to help us to raise 1.2, so now that is 1.5, let's say 1 billion every year. This 1 billion, first of all, is not a loan. The $1 billion that will come into our economy, it will not be a loan. So in the 3-4 years that you are going to run an IMF program, you are going to raise between $3 to $4 billion, not a loan. In that case, instead of putting your youth out of job, you are now going to create more jobs through the Youth Start program, especially in the private sector, and make financing arrangements available either through the banks or through government institutions so that youth startups can be funded and expanded and scaled up in your country. Government says that out of that, instead of even doing Roto, which was bringing us 78 million, government can put down 1.1 billion, let's say even 1 billion, to target payment for road contractors every year in our country, so that we can see an aggressive road construction and quick and prompt payment of IPCs when contractors bring them. And thirdly, the ballooning debt that we are all showing concern, which I've just told you is about 78% of our GDP. We can begin to see its reduction. So if you ask me, between the option of going for an IMF, which is a loan facility, and a yield levy, which has the potential to bring you the most patient of revenues, I don't even know the term to use, but most quieted of all your revenue sources. You don't have to pay back. If you go for a loan, you have to pay. If you go for a Eurobond, you have to pay. If you go to IMF, you have to pay. And you are going to pay with interest in the future. But the most quieted of all your revenues is the ones you are able to raise through taxation. The government says, it's true, it's difficult. And it's not only Ghana. And when you check, today, last week, European Union met and said COVID has increased their debt levels as a continent or as an economy. And they are introducing 3 new different taxes into all EU countries to be able to recover debts as a result of COVID pandemic. Please, have you heard about that? Yes. So every country is doing it. America is seeking to raise additional $3 trillion to shore up the economy, which they said they will introduce taxes to pay. So we too, we are not different from we are part of the world, we are not different from the global situation. Why are we saying we should rather go and borrow from the taxes they are collecting from their citizens to come and fund our economy, and then we will pay in future? Where is that future? So government is pleading. As Ghanaians, we are responsible for building our country. We can always welcome any support that can come from external source, but it cannot replace what we can do for ourselves. And so we want us as a people to accept this yield levy option. And government has explained what it covers, what it doesn't cover. There's so much propaganda about what yield levy covers, what it doesn't cover. But with time, I won't go too much into it, except to say that it is not going to kill Momo transactions in our country. It is going to increase it. we are going to actually invest in the digital space, and it is not going to be a reverse to our digital space program, a digitalization agenda of this country. People have talked about the poor and how it affects them. Ghana's e-levy took care of a certain level of expenditures on Momo. Okay, we did a research. We found that 40% of Momo users do not do more than 100 cedis a day. And because of that, we brought the threshold above 100 Ghana cedis. So if you are doing Momo below 100 Ghana cedis and you are termed as maybe very vulnerable and too sensitive to the tax, you are exempted. If you send it to your grandmother in the village, the withdrawing customer on Momo is not paying. So he's not going to be affected. It is only the sender who is going to pay this Momo. When you move the money from your wallet to your bank account, you are not going to pay. If it is from your bank account to your wallet, you are not going to pay. So all these propaganda against the e-levy and making it look tax on tax, when you are using Momo to pay your Ghana.gov taxes, you don't pay. If you are registered Momo merchant, where you are transferring monies for people, you are not going to pay. So there are several exemptions to take care of all the concerns people have raised. Let's support the e-levy and build our country on our own strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. John Kumah. Interesting presentation there. I'll go to Professor Charles Aka to give us the next presentation, and I'll